Guys endorsing Mr. Lord?
Absolutely.
Mr. Wynn?
Yes, sir.
That's not why they came, but I don't mind that either.
And you said you would debate, did I hear you say you'd debate anybody from South Carolina
That's right.
associated with the fund?
That's right.
How about anybody just associated with it in general, whether from DC or wherever?
Well, anyone from South Carolina, who's a member, a leader, or will stand up for that group. This is a South Carolina debate. I don't think this is a debate that needs to come out of Washington, D.C. And if they thought this was a South Carolina debate, they'd be running these ads in the Low Country and the Midlands too.
What do you know about the ads and where they're running and where they're running?
Well, we know they're being run on WORD, and we know they're being run on, I believe, Fox Cable. We don't know the buy. We don't know how long. They're being run still right now. This group has a website where they have the ads. My children actually watch the ads pretty regularly. They think they're somewhat comical because it shows a plane wrecking into my head, and your children always like to see that.
Is it part of a wider debate on incentives
We don't know.
that is being debated in South Carolina?
Well,
Do you see any connection to a legitimate policy debate in South Carolina?
Well, I think there should be a legitimate debate on incentives, but we don't know what this group is doing. They're only attacking the Boeing deal, and they're only attacking those involved in the Boeing deal. So that's part of the reason to call them out. Call them out, identify who they are, identify why they focused on South Carolina, why they focused on Boeing, why they focused on me, and let's hear what they have to say. If we know who's funding this group, we'll know very quickly what they're up to. If organized labor is funding this group, we know what that agenda is. If the Midwest is funding this group, we know what that agenda is.
The Midwest?
Midwest. Oh, Southeast is beating the Midwest on job development. I don't think they like that very much.
Or the Northwest?
Well, the Midwest and the Northeast and the Northwest.
What about the deal itself? Can you speak to the deal? I'm sure you're familiar with
Sure.
the deal. Well, what are the benefits for South Carolina then, and what are the costs to South? How do they weigh, the costs?
Well, the first thing we have to remember about this deal, what mischaracterizes it, is it calls it a bailout. It's not a bailout. Boeing is a very solvent, very successful country, so it's not a bailout. This was not the corporate welfare that they're trying to portray it as. In South Carolina, the incentive scheme is what's known as a performance-based incentive scheme. Boeing only gets the incentives if they perform, if they bring the thousands of jobs, if they bring the hundreds of millions of dollars of capital investment, they get the incentives. If they don't, the incentives get literally clawed back. So there are no incentives. It's not like the auto manufacturers. You don't get these incentives unless you perform with the jobs and capital investment. Also, what South Carolinians don't know is part of the reason for this incentive scheme is we don't have a very favorable tax code. We have the highest property tax for manufacturers in the nation, the highest in the nation. It's 10.5%. No manufacturer will come to South Carolina and pay 10.5% in property taxes. Washington State, where we were competing for these jobs, has a 4% property tax and no income tax. The other thing folks don't realize is the property where Boeing is located, the 240 acres, has paid no property taxes for the last 50 years. It's government property. Now, that property is going to pay 4% on $1 billion as long as Boeing's there. So for the first time in history, the 240 acres is going to generate tax revenue. And to say that the difference between 4% and 10.5% is a giveaway is not accurate. Secondly, the cash incentives go to infrastructure.
Who was the owner of the land? I'm sorry.
The Charleston County Aviation Authority.
Okay.
It's been owned by the Charleston County Aviation Authority, and it's actually leased to Boeing. So Boeing doesn't own the land. Boeing doesn't own the buildings. It's all being leased. The money went to infrastructure so that Boeing could build its manufacturing. The money went to job training. A large portion of that money is training workers to be able to work at high-level manufacturing. job training, education is a core government function. You'd like to not have to adjust the property taxes for a company coming to South Carolina. I wish all companies in South Carolina had a 4 or 4.5% property tax, but they don't. If you want a BMW, if you want a Michelin, if you want a Boeing, you've got to give them a favorable property tax, or they won't come here. No manufacturer will come to South Carolina at 10.5%.
Did you try to ignore the ads for a while?
We did. We did. We were actually baffled by the ads. We tried to ignore them for a while, but they just wouldn't go away. Our campaign and my supporters get questioned about the ads wherever they go, and we felt we needed to confront them. We felt we needed to bring it to a head, see if these people will actually come out and debate, and if they won't identify themselves, I think they've answered our question. I don't think they're here for South Carolina's prosperity. They're here just to try to tear South Carolina apart for their own special interest agenda, which we don't know what it is. We don't even know what their agenda is. So it's time to bring it to a head. But I'll say one thing, and these gentlemen around me are witness to this. I'm campaigning a great deal in the upstate. Any good Republican would. I have not been confronted with one negative comment about the Boeing deal. And I've been in some very conservative meetings, I've been to some very conservative dinners, and I've heard nothing but praise from the people of Spartanburg, from the people of Greenville, from Anderson, Pickens, Oconee, about Boeing being a good thing for the state, and that wasn't it great that we look good in the eyes of the people of the country. Yeah.
Have you done any polling that suggests the ads are starting to dig into your support?
Actually, our polling showed that they weren't digging into our support. Our polling shows that we're very strong in the upstate. We were actually in the field polling when the ads started, and we saw no reaction, which again is testament to the folks in the upstate understand that Boeing is good for the whole state.
So why not just continue to ignore the ads?
Well, because we're being barraged with questions about it. It's sort of become a distraction for our campaign to have to continually deal with who these people are and are you going to confront them, are you going to raise this issue. If they'd stopped running, and we would have ignored them a week or two ago, but they are still being run this past weekend.